So they want their developers to be more productive, but cost is the only thing slowing them down.
Yeah.
For example, one of a very big fintech player in India, they had traces enabled in their system and their developers were loving it and they were able to resolve issue faster. But it was costing them close to $3 million a year. The upper management decided it's too much of a price and they just abandoned it.
Okay.
So they saved $3 million, but now the developers are struggling. And developer productivity is important, and also how happy your developers are also contribute to them writing better code.
Correct.
The good thing is when you have more offer, you can dictate the terms.
Hi, welcome to another episode of On Tap podcast. Today we have Adarsh, co-founder of CtrlB. He has a deep technical expertise in the domain of infrastructure and AI. Today we'll understand his journey and dig deeper into this sector and get more insights. Thank you, Adarsh, for coming here today.
Yeah, thank you
Why
for
don't you
having
say
me.
hi to the audience first and then we get started?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Adarsh. I'm co-founder and CEO of a company called CtrlB, and we sort of build infrastructure product and help developer team move faster by helping them resolve issues in 1/10 of what they have been doing so far.
Great, Adarsh, it's a very interesting problem statement, and we would love to know more about what exactly is CtrlB all about. What is the solution? How do you really help your clients?
Sure. So one of the biggest problem that developer face when trying to debug any issue that has happened on the system. For example, let's say you are using your Swiggy app and trying to place an order, and you get an error message that, oh no, something went wrong,
Yeah.
which happens quite a lot. So when this happens, usually a developer gets a ring on their cell phone or a page, and then they start investigating as to why this happened, what went wrong on the system and the server, and so on. And when they're doing this exercise, they have to go through a lot of data. This data is called telemetry data, and it usually involves logs, matrices, traces, and events.
Okay.
And this data helps you understand the state of the system at any given point of time. So let's say the issue happened an hour earlier. So they'll just go back and start looking at all this data and then try to form a picture in their head that, okay, this is how my system might have been behaving. And since this developer has built the system or has some understanding of how the system works, they're able to connect these pieces in their mind.
Correct.
But what happens is this starts becoming an issue when the system grows bigger.
Yeah.
Because earlier, 5-10 years ago, there were only 5-10 services that were running. Now it's hundreds and thousands of services people are running. So it's
Yeah.
very difficult for one developer who's trying to debug the issue to have the entire understanding of those 1,000 systems.
Yeah.
So that's why the debugging is slowing down. If you look at the recent report, each year the mean time to resolve, which we call MTTR, that is the time a developer takes to identify and fix the issue, is increasing. And that is because of the complexity of the system and the amount of data increasing. So how CtrlB comes into picture is we help them first collect all this data in one place, and B help correlate all that data, so they don't have to rely on their mental model to build that picture.
Wow.
The data can itself tell them what it is behaving like.
That is very interesting. And you mentioned that you can do it at 1/10 of the cost. What is the magic behind that?
So today, what has happened is since all these telemetry data evolved on a slightly different pace. Logs came first, and then matrices, and now traces are also becoming an important part of this telemetry data. And hence, the solution for this has been fragmented. People use a different software to see logs, people use a different software for traces, and people use a different software for matrices. And what happens is, whenever a developer is trying to get a complete picture, he or she has to jump from 1 to 2 or 3 different tools.
Okay.
On an average, a mid-sized company has close to 5 to 10 different tools
Okay.
for just observing the system. And hence this data is fragmented, and how these tools store this data is they store it on a disk. And with disk, you also need replication, because disk might just blow off and you will lose the data.
Yeah.
And all those replication factors combined increase the cost. What we have figured out is a new concept in computer science called separation of compute and storage. Well, it's not that new, it's just started gaining popularity, I think, a couple of years back. So, what happens is in separation of compute and storage, you disintegrate your storage with your compute layer, and that way you can scale these two independently. Earlier, let's say if your data increased from 100 gigabytes to 1,000 gigabytes, you'll have to add more computers to handle those
Correct.
1,000 gigabytes. Now you don't need to add more computers, you can just add more disk, and the computer can stay on that like 10. So since now both can scale independently, when you need more compute, you add more computers. When you need more storage, you add more disk.
Right.
So that's how you can bring down the cost drastically.
Interesting. And I believe there's not too much competition in the space that you're operating. Even at a global level, there are just two, three players which are there. So that puts you definitely in a very advantageous position. How did you come upon this idea? And did you know that this is a niche, an industry where competition doesn't exist and it happened by design? Or did you just stumble upon it and then figured that, oh, this is a golden opportunity?
No, so when we started, we were trying to build a very broad observability platform, and observability in itself is a very crowded space, more than 300 players worldwide. So we started looking for differentiation as to how we separate ourselves from all these bigger players and all the other 200, 300 players out there. And when we were talking to user, they wanted their developers to be more effective. So we usually initiate the conversations with either VP of engineering or the CTO, depending on the scale of the company. So they want their developers to be more productive, but cost is the only thing slowing them down.
Yeah.
For example, one of a very big fintech player in India, I think the biggest fintech player in India, they had traces enabled in their system and their developers were loving it, and they were able to resolve issue faster, but it was costing them close to $3 million a year.
Oh, wow.
And the upper management decided it's too much of a price and they just abandoned it.
Okay.
So they saved 3 million, but now the developers are struggling.
Right.
So and developer productivity is important, and also how happy your developers are also contribute to them writing better code.
Correct.
So people want these features, but because of cost, it was becoming prohibitive. So that gave us an idea of what we can do differently to make sure that this cost factor is gone.
Okay.
So yeah, that's how this came out to be.
Interesting. There's also an interesting anecdote where you mentioned that you fundraised only so that you could get VCs off your back, and a lot of them were actually chasing you. So how did that whole journey go, and did you eventually end up raising funds?
So yeah, it was a very tricky situation. So when we raised our first angel round, I think that took me 6-7 months to close because I was fairly new to fundraising. I did not know what to actually tell about the product.
Yeah.
And which foot to foot forward. But yeah, eventually after that 6 month journey, I sort of learned on how these people think, and what's the best way to present yourself.
Right.
And since we were building this combined unified storage, which would give you insights since it has access to all the data, a lot of VCs who specifically invest in this AI specific area,
Yeah.
they got interested in us.
Okay.
And then they started talking to us, and we told them we don't need money, and yet they were like, no, you will need money, you'll need to hire more developers and so on
Yeah.
and so forth. So for a moment I also realized that maybe yes, I need the money. And I was okay to dilute, I think 10% or something,
Okay.
for the new capital. But then after a few months of pondering over this, I realized no, I think I can build this with 5 developers. I don't need too many developers.
Yeah.
Because I realized having too many developers at an early stage just increases the communication thread, and you slow down.
Okay.
Plus, what we were building, we needed the kind of developers that sadly are very few in India. We have a lot of good developers, but very few great developers. So yeah, that's one challenge I find in hiring. But anyways, so we realized we don't need a lot of folks, and we were like, no, we don't need it. But then they kept on pushing, and they were like, it's better to raise money when you don't need it rather than when you need it. And I had, I think, another 14-15 months of runway left.
Okay.
So I realized, okay, let's do this. Maybe I can, if not tech, I can go for sales folks.
Yeah.
I can go for some better marketing folks and those kind of things. Maybe hit the market faster, hit the US market faster.
Yeah.
So I went on to raise it. I got the term sheet, and I only agreed for, I think, 500K.
Okay.
But then once I got the term sheet, so many people started calling up, all these small funds and some even bigger funds, as in they want to participate in the round. So that how the round expanded to, I think, 750, 800K.
Okay.
And then I realized, no, I will be diluting too much
Yeah.
for this. And that's not something I want to do. So I just asked them to, okay, no, sorry, we can't do that. So yeah, I mean, that's how you learn to say no. But then people were persistent, so I thought, okay, I'll do a small 300K round, but
Okay.
nothing more than that.
Okay.
The good thing is when you have more offer, you can dictate the terms.
Yeah.
So I ensure that I only dilute 3% for those extra cash,
Okay.
and I also make them happy and also get some extra cash, which is always helpful.
Nice, nice. I think this is a very anti-story of what we hear most of the founders say. So it's very interesting to see how founders are saying no to a lot of VC and the funds coming in. Since you're the technical co-founder in the equation, usually what the common challenge that we find founders struggling with is how do they find a technical co-founder? In your case, how was the journey of finding your non-technical co-founder?
So since I was the one who came up with the idea and also the technical person, I wanted someone more technical than me.
Okay.
So because I knew what I'm trying to build will need more expertise, yes,
Okay.
but we'll also need someone who can just put their head down and work. Um, so that's why in my previous company, Sybil, which is an AI company that helps you analyze your meetings and video calls and give you insights as to what to do next on these calls. So I was working there before this, and there was one guy working with me there as well. So he reached out to me, seeing my post on LinkedIn that, hey, are you building a startup? Seems interesting. Let's work together. And so yeah, that's how I started working with him. He was looking at most of the tech. I was looking at tech, product, and also investments. That's how the journey was like. But eventually, I recently didn't work out. He did not want to dive this deep into tech. He
Okay.
was like, I was okay till the SaaS part, but like this is a bit more for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, he decided to quit.
Okay.
So yeah.
And you also briefly mentioned that hiring good engineers, in fact, great engineers, there are very few great engineers in India, and therefore hiring is a perennial problem. And not just you, I think all tech startups in the country today are struggling with this problem.
Yes.
So, how are you dealing with it? How have you dealt with it so far?
So far, I think I would sound a little racist, but I only restrict my hiring to IITs, like,
Okay.
because what happens is I've tried to hire from non-IITs or NITs also, and the quality is not there for some reason, like be it the environment that you get in your college or be it the seniors that you can look up to. The quality is missing. So that's why I only limit my hiring to IITs. Now, a challenge with hiring with IITs is you have to offer great packages,
Yeah.
because they are getting great offers from elsewhere. So what has helped me is my network from college. So
Yeah.
since since I was quite popular in college, a lot of people know me, and hence it is easier for me to convince them to take a huge pay cut and
Oh,
come
wow.
join us.
Okay.
So that is something working. But yeah, I think one way to distinguish between a great and a good engineer is by not asking them to solve a DSA question, rather asking them to build something. So give them a week, ask them to build something, and then see how they think. Because DSA is something everyone is doing a 3 month, 6 months course and learning it.
Yeah.
And since most of the questions anyway are repeated, because we also pick questions from the same websites they
Yeah.
learn from. So that's why you just can't distinguish with DSA. So in any of my interviews, we have never had a DSA round.
Oh, wow.
And what we do is rather A, this assignment, and B is we give them a broken system and we ask them to figure out why it's not working. And that is live on call. They can run any command they want,
Oh, wow.
but they have to, after an hour, they have to tell what went wrong, how they would fix it, and those kind of things.
Very
So
interesting.
that helps you distinguish.
You yourself are from IIT Kanpur. I wanted to know if there is any support system that you get from the college, whether some entrepreneurship cell, any incubator, any sort of support as an alum that you're getting from back campus.
So IIT Kanpur, yes, they do have a incubator, but it's more beneficial for biotech kind of a companies which need bigger laboratories and areas to work in.
Okay.
Software is not that beneficial, but yes, we do get a lot of help from a huge professor network.
Okay.
Because they have been teaching infrastructure for 20 years now. So they have seen it evolve, and they know the nuances of it. So I do shoot one of my professor back at ITK an email once in a while, and I get his views on how he thinks the space is evolving and what we are doing. So yeah, that's good. Plus, I think getting good interns and good sort of full-time people, that is a great plus. That is what sort of that alum network helps you. Plus also fundraising, I think. 5 people on my cap table are my college seniors.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah.
You've also been a serial founder, right? You've started 2 businesses in the past, and this is a third startup. There are 2 questions I have on this. One is what led to this journey of starting up multiple startups? And second, what really is the core motivation of somebody who's starting up more than once? Because usually, if your startup is working well and you've more or less achieved what you wanted to by starting up, right? So, what is the motivation of going on to other startups?
Sure. So I think this journey dates a little back, and this starts from my college days. So since like before joining college, there was no idea of startup. Like fairly, so because no one in my family is a businessman, everyone is in government service. So there's no idea of business. There's no idea of startup.
Yeah.
Never had those conversations ever. Um, so in first year, second year, it was mostly like, okay, go get a good job, work somewhere, and those kind of things. But when I got into college and I started using my talent to actually solve problems there. So for an instance, I in the hostel mess. So whenever you were going to get some food items, you had to write your name and room number. So what students were doing is they were writing someone else's name and someone else's room number. So at the end of the month, the billing used to be very difficult because
Oh.
everyone used to claim that, hey, this is not my real bill.
Right.
And because of that, the mess workers were not getting paid on time because they were on the monthly wage.
Yeah.
They were not fixed workers. Earlier, they would have been fixed workers, but since IITs tried to privatize, this happened.
Yeah.
And that was causing a huge issue for them. So I saw this problem and I realized, okay, let's automate this entire thing. So I built a mess automation system. I went talked to the warden and the director, got permission, got some funds,
Yeah.
then got a network connection from our computer center to the mess, installed a couple of PCs, and then built the software for that mess automation system. So once that was done, this problem vanished because now everyone had their own unique 4-digit password that they had to enter whenever they are buying something.
Okay.
So that way you could generate bill easily and everyone was getting paid on time. So that's the first problem I solved in campus.
That's very good.
The second one was, so whenever your parents used to visit, you had this guest room where you could book. But booking one guest room and it would take anywhere from 2 to 3 days because you need 3 people's signature to just book one room.
Okay.
Your warden and your hall office in charge and those kind of things. So again, I built a system that would just automate all that, and those people could sign from their phone as well, so you don't have to go rushing the entire campus and finding them. Because in our case, the wardens are the professors. So yeah. So that's the second problem I solved. So that gave me a hint that okay, I can solve problems and people are using it. So that gave me some sort of a thinking that okay, I can build something. And then in third year, we have our intern season. So since I built the system on which all these companies were using to shortlist resume and candidates, my resume read just one line that I built the system you're seeing this on.
Oh, wow.
So whenever the HRs used to see it, they were like, okay, I think I've downloaded something wrong. And I was always rejected from every company. So that made me realize these guys are stupid. And then one company shortlisted me. I think it was the bank. And they shortlisted me and I went to their... they gave a very difficult problem statement, solved it, and then went to the interview. And so I was the problem statement was difficult, so I was expecting the interview to be on something similar line.
Yeah.
But they asked me a question that, okay, how many footballs are sold in India in 1 year? And me being a stupid nerd, I had no idea of how to answer this. And I said, bahut sari. And they threw me out. So my interview ended in 5 minutes. And then I realized, no, corporate is not for me. It you get the perception that something big is happening, but when you actually go inside and look, people are doing small thing that adds up to big thing. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a small part of a big machine. So after that instance was when I realized, no, I want to build my own startup.
Okay.
So yeah, that's how this idea came to be. I did my first startup right after graduation. So it was just selling the same placement automation system to other colleges.
Okay.
But since again I was a noob, I did not know how to sell and those kind of things. I had to shut it down in 6 months. And then I was like, okay, let me go and get some experience before plunging in again.
Yeah.
Because I had realized I cannot work for a long period of time in corporate.
Yeah.
It just drives me crazy, not like having the ability yet not being able to make that change. So yeah, that's what pushed me to. You fail, like the previous ones had to pivot because we could not get to revenue fast enough.
Yeah.
So yes, you fail, but as long as you are learning what not to do, I feel that you can go ahead. Because a startup journey is like exploring all unknown unknowns.
Yeah.
So it's more important to know what not to do than to know what to do.
Great. This was very helpful, Adarsh. It was lovely talking to you. Before we wrap it up, I have one last question, which is my favorite question that I ask all my guests. Which is the one book that you're reading right now, and what's your normal genre of interest?
So I mostly read biographies and watch war histories.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm not reading any book currently. I don't get time to read much, but yeah, whenever I'm working, I do play some history documentaries on the background.
Okay.
So yeah, right now I'm like very much interested in the Middle East conflicts and seeing how it evolved and why the Middle East looks the way it does today. So yeah, that's something I do when I'm working or when I'm not working.
Interesting. And which is the favorite autobiography that you've read so far?
I think it would be about JFK.
Okay.
Yeah, and he also happens to be the person who inspires me the most because, and I think I love one of his quote that we don't do things because they're easy, we do them because they're hard.
Yeah.
And that has been a guiding principle for me.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's very fascinating. Thank you again for taking time today and sharing your wonderful journey with us, sharing all the insights. I hope it was helpful for our audience as well. I hope all of you got interesting nuggets. Anything you want to say before we part?
Yeah, I think one important part when you're starting up is not giving up on the first failure, because what I have learned from my journey is you'll fail 10 times before you succeed once. And if you look at what Jack Ma said is tomorrow is going to be hard, day after tomorrow is going to be even harder, but a day after that is going to be beautiful. So you need to survive till that day. I think that's all the startup journey is about.
Great, that's very wonderfully put. Thank you again, everybody, for listening in, and hopefully, it was insightful and interesting for all of you. We'll catch you in the next one. Till then, goodbye.